Do you ever wonder why the world seems just slightly off? Why certain people walk through life untouched, while you stumble in ways you can't explain? They've been watching, studying, filing every move, every hesitation in a place you'll never see. And you think you're normal. But the truth, you're exactly the type they keep hidden records on. Every secret, every thought cataloged, every misstep silently noted, and they decide who remains unnoticed. They never needed to raise their voice. That's the first mistake people like you make. Thinking control is loud. Real control is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't threaten. It simply adjusts the room until you move the way it wants. And you call it coincidence. You call it routine. You call it normal. Silent control begins long before you notice anything is wrong. It starts with patterns. What you click, what you ignore, what makes you hesitate for half a second longer than you should. Those pauses matter. They're logged, studied, compared. You think no one cares about such small details. That belief is what keeps the system invisible. They don't tell you what to think. That would be crude. Instead, they decide what never reaches you, which ideas die quietly before you ever hear them, which questions feel uncomfortable before you can even form them. Your opinions feel personal because you arrived at them alone, or so it seems. But solitude is easy to simulate when the path has already been designed. You've noticed it, haven't you? That subtle pressure to conform without being asked. The feeling that stepping out of line would cost you something you can't quite define. No threats, no warnings. Just a quiet understanding that resistance feels expensive. That's not fear. That's conditioning refined into elegance. Silent control doesn't chase rebels. It redirects them. It offers distractions disguised as freedom. Endless choices that all lead to the same outcome. You scroll. You select. You feel autonomous. Meanwhile, the range of acceptable behavior tightens without resistance. No cages. No chains. Just preferences gently reshaped over time. You think elite power looks like meetings behind closed doors. It doesn't. It looks like systems that run themselves because you help them run. Every time you self-censor, every time you dismiss a thought because it feels too much, every time you correct yourself before anyone else has to, that's when control has fully matured. The files don't describe you as dangerous. Not yet. They describe you as predictable, responsive, malleable under the right conditions. They track what makes you play faster. Isolation, validation, uncertainty. Silence is their favorite tool because silence forces you to fill the gaps yourself. And you always choose the safest explanation. You tell yourself you're independent because no one has ordered you around. But control doesn't need commands when it can shape instincts. When discomfort trains, you better than authority ever could. When approval becomes currency and invisibility feels like safety, the most efficient form of dominance is the one you defend. You protect the system because it hasn't hurt you directly. You rationalize its presence because it's familiar. You even mock those who question it, because doubt threatens the structure that keeps your world stable. Silent control works best on people who believe they're too ordinary to matter, too small to be monitored, too average to be worth the effort. That belief is written in the margins of your file, underlined, because average behavior at scale is the most valuable data there is. You were never meant to feel trapped. Trapped people push back. You were meant to feel managed, guided, gently limited, a life narrowed so slowly that each reduction feels reasonable, logical, necessary. And the most unsettling part isn't that this control exists. It's that by the time you sense it, you've already learned how to stay quiet. You believe agendas announce themselves. Plans, motives, intentions, out in the open, arguing for attention. That belief keeps you compliant. Hidden agendas don't persuade, they position. By the time you notice something feels wrong, you're already standing exactly where you were meant to stand. They never ask for your trust. Trust is unstable. Instead, they build familiarity, repetition, comfort. The same phrases, the same narratives, the same approved questions circulating until they feel neutral. Harmless, obvious. You stop examining them because nothing alarming seems to be happening. That's when the agenda is safest. When scrutiny feels unnecessary. Every system you interact with has two purposes, the one you're told, and the one that benefits someone you'll never meet. You see efficiency, convenience, progress. They see leverage, influence, long-term behavioral shaping. You participate because refusal would mean stepping into uncertainty, and uncertainty has been carefully framed as danger. Hidden agendas thrive on partial truths, not lies. Lies are fragile. Truths, selectively arranged, are far more effective. You're given just enough information to feel informed, but never enough to understand the structure. You argue over surface details, while the foundation remains untouched, and untouched structures grow powerful. You assume agendas are driven by ideology or greed. Sometimes they are. More often, they're driven by predictability. Humans who believe they're normal behave in statistically reliable ways. They react to fear the same way. They chase validation the same way. They rationalize submission the same way. That makes you useful without ever being aware of your role. Notice how often decisions are framed as inevitable. This is how things are now. There's no alternative. Everyone agrees. Consensus is a manufactured atmosphere. When enough signals point in one direction, resistance feels irrational, even selfish. You don't want to be that person. The agenda counts on that instinct. You're encouraged to express yourself endlessly, loudly, publicly. Opinions, preferences, frustrations. You mistake expression for power. Meanwhile, those expressions are sorted, categorized, and fed back into systems designed to anticipate you. The more transparent you become, the less visible the agenda needs to be. Hidden agendas don't control you directly. They control the environment around your choices. They narrow options while insisting you're free to choose. They reward compliance subtly and punish deviation quietly. No confrontation, no force. Just consequences that feel personal, as if you failed rather than disobeyed an invisible boundary. You've felt that hesitation before saying certain things. That internal calculation. That moment where you adjust your tone, soften your language, or stay silent altogether. You tell yourself it's maturity, intelligence, social awareness. It's conditioning responding exactly as designed. The agenda doesn't silence you. It teaches you to silence yourself. They don't need you to believe in them. Belief invites questions. They only need you to function within the framework. To wake up, participate, consume, react, repeat. To mistake routine for neutrality. To confuse stability with safety. Some people are flagged, not because they resist, but because they notice. Because they pause where others glide forward. Because they feel the pressure behind the curtain. Those people aren't eliminated. That would be inefficient. They're redirected, distracted, overstimulated, given just enough noise to drown out clarity. You think you're outside of this because you're self-aware, because you're listening now. Awareness without power is still containment. Knowing the game doesn't mean you're not being played. It often just means you understand the rules well enough to stay inside them. Hidden agendas don't rush. Time is on their side. Generations adapt. Language changes. Norms shift. What once felt intrusive becomes standard. What once felt wrong becomes how things work. And people like you, people who think they're normal, adjust without realizing anything was taken. Your file doesn't label you as an enemy. It labels you as manageable. And that classification determines everything you'll never be told. You don't fall into traps the way you imagine. There's no snap, no sudden realization. Cognitive traps feel like your own thoughts behaving responsibly, sensibly, logically. That's why they work. You step into them willingly, convinced you're thinking clearly, while every conclusion you reach was anticipated long before you arrive there. The first trap is familiarity. The mind trusts what it has seen before. Repetition breeds credibility, not truth. When an idea appears often enough, resistance feels unnecessary. You stop questioning not because you're convinced, but because questioning feels inefficient. That's the moment the trap seals. You didn't accept the idea. You simply stopped resisting it. Then there's the illusion of choice. Multiple paths laid out neatly, each one appearing different, each one leading to the same endpoint. You weigh options. You deliberate. You feel intelligent for considering alternatives. Meanwhile, the boundaries were drawn before you even entered the room. Choice keeps you occupied while direction remains controlled. Cognitive traps rely heavily on your need to feel competent. You want to believe you'd notice manipulation if it happened. That belief alone is enough to disarm you. The more confident you are in your independence, the less likely you are to check for invisible influence. Pride is a remarkably cooperative weakness. Another trap tightens around certainty. Humans crave conclusions. Open loops feel dangerous. So when a narrative offers clarity, an explanation that neatly organizes chaos. You grab it, even if it's incomplete, even if it's misleading. The relief of understanding overrides the discomfort of doubt, and once certainty settles in, new information becomes a threat rather than a tool. You're also trapped by comparison. You constantly measure yourself against extremes: geniuses, fools, rebels, conformists. As long as you're not at the edges, you assume you're safe, normal, unremarkable. That assumption is useful. Average thinkers generate the most predictable patterns. Predictability is easier to guide than brilliance or madness. Cognitive traps don't suppress your thoughts. They prioritize them. Certain ideas rise faster. Certain doubts feel heavier. Certain questions feel inappropriate to ask. Not forbidden, just awkward. You sense an invisible social gravity pulling you back into alignment. You tell yourself it's instinct. It's not. It's reinforcement learned through countless small corrections. You've been trained to distrust silence inside your own mind. Empty space feels uncomfortable, so you fill it with opinions, with noise, with borrowed conclusions. Stillness might allow clarity, so the trap keeps you busy, always processing, always reacting, never observing long enough to see the structure you're inside. The most elegant trap convinces you that awareness equals escape. You learn the terms, the concepts, the warnings. You nod along. You feel informed. But information without disruption is harmless to the system. Knowing about manipulation doesn't undo it, especially when the knowledge itself becomes another layer of control. You also underestimate how often fear makes decisions for you while pretending to be logic. Fear of isolation, fear of ridicule, fear of being wrong publicly. Those fears don't shout. They whisper suggestions that sound reasonable, practical, mature, and you follow them, believing you chose wisely. Cognitive traps are reinforced by rewards that seem unrelated. Approval, belonging, stability. When compliance is rewarded quietly, resistance feels unnecessarily costly. You don't feel forced. You feel guided. That distinction matters. Force creates enemies. Guidance creates participants. At no point do you feel trapped. That's the final mechanism. You feel functional, rational, in control. The walls are psychological, not physical, and they're padded with your own reasoning. You defend them instinctively because they feel like you. The files don't describe you as unintelligent. They describe you as optimized. Your thought patterns mapped. Your reactions anticipated. Your limits defined by beliefs you didn't realize were installed. And the trap doesn't close when you understand it. It closes when you believe understanding was enough. Dominance isn't asserted. It's engineered. Loud authority invites resistance. Calculated dominance avoids it entirely. You don't feel overpowered. You feel managed. You mistake restraint for freedom, and that misunderstanding is the foundation everything else is built on. They never rush to control you. Urgency creates suspicion. Instead, they observe. They wait. They let you reveal yourself through habits, preferences, contradictions. You believe you're invisible in the crowd. That belief makes your behavior cleaner, more honest. Data gathered without pressure is always more accurate. Calculated dominance begins with distance. The ones above never engage directly. Proximity creates friction. So influence is layered. Filters, systems, intermediaries. You interact with surfaces, not sources. You negotiate with rules instead of people. That way, power never needs to explain itself. You're allowed small victories. That's intentional. Occasional success keeps you invested. You interpret progress as proof of autonomy, unaware it's been rationed. Too much failure would trigger rebellion. Too much success would create independence. So outcomes are balanced carefully. Just enough reward to maintain loyalty, just enough frustration to keep you striving. Dominance works best when it feels deserved, when consequences appear linked to effort rather than obedience. You blame yourself when things stall. You credit the system when things improve. That reversal protects the structure. Responsibility is shifted downward. Control remains upward. They understand something you don't like admitting. Most people don't want power. They want predictability, safety, permission to stop thinking beyond the next step. Calculated dominance provides that relief. It reduces chaos while pretending to offer choice. And people protect what reduces their anxiety, even if it limits them. You've been trained to respect authority that appears neutral. Algorithms, metrics, best practices. Numbers don't argue, so you don't either. Decisions framed as technical feel inevitable, impersonal. You don't fight what you can't negotiate with. You adapt instead. The dominance isn't emotional. There's no anger in it, no cruelty, just precision. Cold adjustments made without attachment. When something stops working, it's replaced. When someone becomes inefficient, they're sidelined without confrontation. No punishment, just irrelevance. And nothing terrifies the human mind more than becoming unnecessary. Calculated dominance doesn't silence critics. It absorbs them. Dissent is monitored, categorized, sometimes even encouraged. Controlled opposition stabilizes the system. It gives the appearance of balance, while ensuring outcomes remain unchanged. You argue within parameters that were defined long before you spoke. You're constantly evaluated, but never openly judged. Scores without explanations. Feedback without context. That ambiguity keeps you compliant. You work harder trying to correct invisible mistakes. You adjust behavior preemptively. Self-discipline becomes reflex. The system doesn't need to enforce. It watches you enforce yourself. You assume dominance must be visible to be real. But visibility invites challenge. Real dominance hides behind process, behind policy, behind culture. It convinces you that no one is in charge, while ensuring nothing moves without permission. Even your self-image has been shaped to cooperate. You see yourself as reasonable, adaptable, not extreme. That identity keeps you centered, safe from scrutiny, safe from suspicion. Extremes attract attention. Normals are trusted, and trust grants access. Calculated dominance never demands loyalty. It builds dependency. You rely on systems you didn't design, rules you didn't write, structures you can't see end to end. Opting out feels unrealistic, impractical, risky. And so participation continues without force. The files don't describe domination as an act. They describe it as a condition. A stable state where resistance feels illogical, obedience feels voluntary, and awareness changes nothing. Where you continue functioning exactly as expected. Calm, capable, compliant. Convinced you're simply living your life. And dominance doesn't tighten when you notice it. It tightens when you realize there's nowhere to apply pressure back.